Welcome to Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies, a podcast series where we talk to entrepreneurs from India's biggest tech startups to go back to that time when. That time when you needed allies. That time when you needed sound advice and good mentors. That time when you were looking for the right tech partners who can accelerate growth. I'm your host, Sairee Chahal, a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and evangelist for women's internet. I currently run SHEROES and Mahila to create internet ecosystems for women, helping them with employment, entrepreneurship, and access to capital. On every episode of Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies, we discover how industry leaders respond to challenges in their entrepreneurial journeys. We also learn how initiatives like Dell for Startups empower companies through innovative technology, strategic guidance, proven practical capabilities, and expert consulting assistance. Today, I am having a conversation with Karthik Jayaraman, the co-founder and managing director of WayCool Foods, an agri-tech startup that drives social impact to transform India's food economy. Based out of Chennai, this agriculture supply chain company procures, processes, and distributes a range of food products, including fresh produce and staples like rice, pulses, wheat flour, and dairy products. WayCool's soil to sale model engages with a base of more than 150,000 farmers in over 50 regions across India. They use a tech-enabled supply chain approach that merges the physical and digital worlds in their business model. In this episode, Mr. Jayaraman and I discuss logistical challenges while scaling the business up, dealing with volatile purchase patterns, and managing a highly technology-dependent business. They use robotic process automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning technologies to provide value to suppliers and clients alike. Incredible journey, incredible company that you're building. So let me jump right in. You clearly spent a bunch of time in automotive and supply chain and a lot of real world manufacturing, something that a lot of new age founders don't seem to have. Tell us, how did this transition come about and what made you do it in the first place?
I think, like you said, I've been working for a little more than 2 decades in and around manufacturing and traditional industry, if you will, both as a consultant and as a practitioner. But at some point, you start wondering, what are you really doing? And, the industry has massive strengths, but it also is, in my view, it's in a state of decline. I think the automotive industry will be progressively replaced by what I call the mobility industry, where electric, autonomous, shared, all of these trends will definitely catch on in spite of initial hiccups. So what next was the question. I still had half a career left and had learnt a lot because of the nature of the industry. And we felt that, I personally felt that there was an opportunity to put these skills to use where it can deliver some value and some impact. Food and Ag was actually the brainchild of my co-founder Sanjay. We know each other socially very well, and so it was Sanjay who said, "Hey, we keep reading a lot about food and agri and crisis in the agricultural sector, volatility in food supply, questions on hygiene, etc. Maybe, and this all seems to be hovering around the supply chain, and you have skills in that area, and I have an interest in food and ag. Why don't we take a look at it?" That turned out to be an inspired selection because, what we learned in the automotive industry is what Toyota taught all of us. They said that if you want efficient supply chains that are also responsive, you need to move from a push-based supply chain to a pull-based supply chain. And Toyota had brilliantly done this in a sector which is quite volatile. It has its own recessions and booms. Food is not at all volatile. The demand is inelastic. We're going to consume the same amount of tomatoes whether they cost 1 rupee or 40 rupees. It's an essential good. It's unaffected by recessions, is unaffected by boom. it impacts everybody positively. And if you're looking at the ag end of food, it impacts at least half the population of the country. So I said, what better sector is available for you to actually reimagine the supply chain along relatively modern principles? That was the motivation to pick food and ag as a space. Of course, we've learned quite a lot about the sector. We approached it with the humility that it was due. It's an 8,000-year-old sector, if you will. But and we were taught a lot because of that, and that's really the background here.
Super inspiring. I think very relevant not only to the country we are in, but I think it is a global industry, and it does need smart brains of our generation to pay more attention. What I hear you say, Karthik, is that obviously there are some unique insights that you also built or developed about the sector. Like one of the things that I've heard about your insight is about the middlemen, that they are not the reason for the gap between the farmer and the consumer. And of course, you went cold into an industry you didn't come from. So, two questions here. One is, walk us through some of these insights as you went into the industry. And, I'm sure you had some assumptions that probably were broken. And second is learnings for founders who are trying to get into a new industry altogether. I, for one, made a shift from consumer internet to fintech, and of course, I have learned so much about regulation in 1 year that I didn't do in the last 40. So clearly, there is a learning curve for founders here. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that walking into this industry.
I think, yeah, you're right. It was every day we learn something new in this space. What we did for the first few months was to walk back down each of the supply chains. If you're looking at fresh produce, what happens from the mandi where it is delivered to the city all the way to the back. Similarly for grains and staples and so on. And there was a lot of unlearning. The first thing you learn when you read the papers is that people worry about food security and whether we produce enough to fill our own needs. There is a psychological overhang of the PL 480 days, as they call it in the food industry, where India had to actually literally get food as donation from Western countries. But the data suggests otherwise. The data suggests that we're a food surplus nation, and that's what we learned when we got in. But we also learned that we lose as much food as what Brazil consumes in a year between the farm gate and the retail outlet. By the way, most countries lose food. If you look at the West, they say they lose 45% of their food. But most of it is lost in the supermarket shelf or in the refrigerator. The Western habit is to buy for 2 weeks, put it in your refrigerator. Sometimes you forget about it. Sometimes the product rots, etc. Whereas our loss happened between the farm gate and the retail point. So this we felt was an addressable loss, and that really was the problem statement with which we went in. The second problem statement was also the spread between what you rightly pointed out, the spread between the farm gate and what the retailer prices the product at. Looks as if there is a lot of profit appropriation that happens between these two ends, but it's not true. The reality is that there are so many intermediaries between the farm gate and the retailer that each one makes a sliver of profit. And the reason there are so many intermediaries is because A, our farms are small, B, our retail outlet is small. And none of these are going to change, right? Our farms are 2.5 acres. And the average American farm size is 440 acres. I recently visited a friend's farm in the US. He's a small farmer by his own definition, and he has a 5,000 acre ranch, right? So you can imagine what a 2.5 acre farm can produce. It's about 11 quintals of pulses or maybe 600 kg of tomatoes per harvest. That's not enough to fill a truck. So you've got to have aggregators in the supply chain who actually consolidate from multiple farms and fill a truck. And those layers of aggregation add to cost, add to logistics, and add to food loss and damage, because not everyone will handle the product appropriately. Equally, we see a lot of investment into quick commerce, etc. These are welcome investments. But we forget that 70% of India lives on weekly wages. And the person collects their salary on Friday or Saturday, picks up some small quantities of groceries from the neighborhood store as they're walking back home, or the homemaker steps out and buys it from the neighborhood store. Your neighborhood store is the last mile platform, and it's going to be around for a while. That store cannot stock much. And consequently, you've got to disaggregate that big 25-ton truck of, say, rice that's coming in and deliver maybe 5 bags of rice to each of these these outlets. So similarly, one bag of onion to each of these outlets. Hence, you have disaggregators. So this is what is causing the spread, and this is part of the reason for the loss. There is another subtler reason for the loss in food as well. The subtler reason is that because of so many layers, the information flow on true demand is not reaching the production hubs. Producers produce based on their traditional habits. They produce based on what they see as happenings in the nearest mandi. They produce based on what the inputs provider is urging them to produce. The inputs provider is also taking the guidance from the nearby mandi. So a small change in, say, arrivals, which causes, say, an increase in price, can cause a distortive behavior down the stream. This is called the bullwhip effect in the supply chain space, right? So small, right now, I just read this morning in the papers that farmers in Coimbatore are pouring tomatoes on the road. On March 10th, I remember reading in the papers that tomato prices had crossed 60 rupees a kg. So, and I can guarantee you that 4 months from now, we'll again read in the newspaper, November in Chennai, you will read about tomato prices crossing 60 rupees per kg. This is almost predictably volatile, right? So, this volatility is what is causing considerable amount of food loss. When your prices tank, farmers basically let the product rot on the fields. When the prices go up, there is all kinds of product that's being pulled out of the ground and delivered to you, and they are not in the consumable state. So by the time it reaches your city, the food is useless anyway. So a lot of subtler factors were at play over here. So we kept adopting the model, first adopting the hypothesis and adapting the model to suit these learnings as we go along, and we continue to do that. Frankly, that is really my takeaway. Nobody is going to hold a hypothesis sacrosanct. There is a big problem out there which people will acknowledge. The nature of the problem, as you do in our old methods of Kaizen, etc., you have this method called 5 whys. As you do the 5 whys, you find a different root cause, and therefore your hypothesis has to change. What is valued is the toolkit and the problem solving ability. And entrepreneurs of today bring a toolkit that's perhaps better equipped than entrepreneurs of the past. I'll keep slipping back to my automotive examples, right? If you find that your engine oil has contaminated, you are going in, your traditional mechanic will listen to the sound of the engine. They'll have a very basic rudimentary analysis to figure out what went wrong. Your modern mechanic will have a laptop and they'll be able to plug in and diagnose. But then when you assume, for example, that the head gasket is blown. But when you open the engine, you might discover that it's not the head gasket that's blown, but the cylinder is scored. You've got to change your hypothesis in that case, right? You've got to change the problem you're solving for. But maybe your toolkit is relevant to that as well. That's the way I would look at it. I don't think in the early stages anyway, even if an investor is putting money in you, they're not putting money in you for the hypothesis. They're putting money in you because of your ability. And therefore, we shouldn't be afraid of changing our problem statement as we learn more.
Super refreshing to hear that. I think it's fascinating given how complex this problem is, and being able to change your hypothesis as many times. And I think you have built an ecosystem that's pretty unconventional. 150,000 farmers, 50 regions, 72 procurement centers, if I'm correct, and 1,200 tons of produce a day.
So we just clearly hit 2,000. So
oh wow, congratulations on that. So clearly, and now you're expanding to the Middle East. You're testing that. What seems to me is there's a giant supply chain operation, both in aggregation and disaggregation, that you seem to have cracked. And we would love to hear what is your approach to problem solving here, and of course, how are you dealing with this? Going from 1,200 to 2,000. In blink of an eye, and growing.
I think we have to decide where we lay the boundaries of our business, right? There are different access available which you can choose to lay the boundaries of our business. Some people choose the commodity access. They're saying, I will deal only with grains or only with fresh produce or only dairy. Others choose the customer. I'll deal only with this segment. We chose geography first. We said that while it's possible for me to buy from across the country, and indeed we buy now from 25 countries across the world, where we distribute should be restricted to where we can govern. And that's the reason our focus has been largely in southern and western India. We made mistakes as well. We went all the way out to NCR and we started some initial operations there. And we started a very simple operation there where, we were basically sending bell peppers during Shadi ka season, because you know how they decorate it, the fairgrounds, etc. But we realized that one commodity is so hard to pack, so hard to ship, so hard to pick up at the other end where we don't have any people, and so hard to deliver without damage, and finally it's so hard to collect money back. We said that this is crazy, it doesn't work. In the early days, I used to have a rule saying we will not sell a product anywhere where I can't drive to that location. And I normally drive, I don't fly much in the south, so the roads are pretty good. So I said I must be able to drive to that location because I must be able to govern that space reasonably well. We should have controls, we should have the same practices that are being followed, for example, in Chennai, being followed in that location as well. So that determined, that's why we restricted our footprint. In case of the UAE, it was an easy decision because the diaspora is largely from the same region, so they consume the same products. Even the media where the consumers come to know of the brands is the same media. It's the Malayalam media that is present in both these locations. And most of their food comes from, it's either shipped out of Kochi port or Chennai port or Mumbai port, or it goes from Devanahalli airport in Bangalore or Coimbatore or some of the Kerala airports. So it was a logical extension for us. Frankly, it's easier for me to go there than to go into NCR. And even within this geography, we've made sure that every new geography that we open up, there's somebody who's a veteran, who's been trained either in Chennai or Bangalore, who's relocated there and sets up operations there, so that the template is replicated. It's the tech enables you to replicate the model, but this is still a person-dependent business. Both the template and the trust is derived when you move somebody who's from within your mother locations and is going and restarting that, and that limits a geographic footprint. The same thing in terms of customers also. We used to service multiple categories of customers. Of course, COVID itself impacted a large customer base, which is the Horeca base. But then we also realized that it didn't make sense for us to service that base even without COVID because we weren't the appropriate partner for that segment. So we've exited a few customer segments and we focused on the small retailer and the small wholesaler. These are learnings that have come along the way. And yes, we try not to burn anything beyond our fingers, but we keep trying to, shift around the model based on learnings and small experiments.
Fascinating. I love that, beyond our fingers. So clearly, you guys have cracked a lot of hard problems, and I couldn't help notice the laptop analogy in the automotive sector, and of course now the whole idea of being able to govern, and that clearly means that your IT and digital infrastructure to set this whole chain up and to build all the solutions, and there are probably hundreds of small solutions that translate into one giant solution that WayCool stands for. I know Dell has been partner and an infrastructure provider for you folks. Walk us through some of the systems that you've built and how Dell has been instrumental in making some of these things happen.
So to keep it very easy, we sit and work on Dell. Right, all our our storage, our disaster recovery, our computing devices, they're all Dell systems, and we like working with them because they work directly with us, and therefore service levels that we get are very different from what you would get when you're buying machines through a dealer. And I think now we're talking to them for a number of other solutions which basically enable us to make the business scalable, right? They're a partner though that's willing to scale along with us, and that encourages us to continue working with them. In terms of systems, you're absolutely right. When we started out, we started buying package solutions and started trying to string together package solutions as well as some of the SaaS solutions that are out there in the market. The issue is not in the excellence of these individual solutions. They are indubitably excellent. They'll have more features forever than what I'm building for myself. But the interconnectivity between the platforms, the governance and controls that result as an outcome of this interconnectivity was missing. If you're looking at distribution management, you have a bunch of salespeople who are going to go out there and take orders. That order has to flow back to your warehouse where the picking, packing and shipping has to happen. There's a logistics leg and there's a collections leg. Each one of these has a different package. And I can talk through APIs, but imagine the number of API linkages that will happen. The specificity of my industry will have some certain requirements, etc. They were not being met. So we said, let's build this ourselves. We ended up building 58 different apps, and these apps talk to each other seamlessly. And when you network these apps together, we cover everything from the retailer to the farmer and all the way back. For example, if you're a retailer, if you're tech savvy and you're okay with using an app, we have an app for you where you can simply repeat yesterday's order or place a new order, find out what are the new schemes, and a whole bunch of such features. If you're not tech savvy, I've got a salesperson who is given a set beat plan on their phone, and they follow that beat plan. They'll come to your shop and they'll take an order on their app anyway. While doing that, they will check your past dues. They will simply open up a QR code with which you can pay us. Most of our collections are digital today, and they will also suggest recommendations to you based on an engine that makes relevant recommendations to that shopkeeper. So that salesperson takes your order. But irrespective of whether that salesperson takes your order or you place an order, I've already predicted your order. And I'm able to do that now because I have 6 years of data. I'm getting increasingly better at it. And as my prediction improves, my supply chain becomes stronger and stronger. Now, the reason I need to predict your order is you'll place an order on me this evening for delivery tomorrow morning. But I've got to place an order on my farmers. If it's fresh produce, for example, I've got to place an order on them yesterday for this morning's harvest, which will be delivered to you tomorrow morning. And that is one of the tools that works well for us. So based on this forecast, our information is fed back to our collection centers. And we have an algorithm that also determines which collection center will supply how much of what, based on inputs on what grows in that area and what the past performance of that center has been. Now, therefore, everybody knows what volume to buy. The next question is, what price do I buy it at? So we have a network of benchmarkers. There's another app called Benchmarkers, where we have a bunch of gig workers who go and capture data from all the mandis. An algorithm processes this information and sets the roof price for each collection center. So you can buy below that price or at that price if you want. So price is set by a system, volume requirement is set by a system, and then we send out messages to the farmers. Once they confirm supplies, PO is sent to them, and the next morning they deliver it to my collection center. The moment it reaches my collection center, it is weighed, it is GRN, it is reflected in my system. And consequently, I know how much inventory is building up on one side and how much orders I am receiving on the other. I always under order from my farms. Therefore, I will always have a gap between supply and demand. The delta is what we place as a standard order on my mandi partners. So the tech is used to drive a lot of this. Now, to this core, we've attached 2 bolt-ons that provide additional services to our retailer and to our producers. For the retailer, we have a recommendation engine that uses, of course, data from our own system, but also captures Google demographic data, etc., to profile their audience and make specific recommendations. For example, all of Bangalore, you're familiar with the city, is largely buying Sona Masuri rice. But then there are Bangalore is one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the country. There are other varieties of rice that pockets of Bangalore would pay a premium for. The technology is now able to detect that and make recommendations. 1 or 2 shopkeepers will pilot, and if it becomes a success, automatically the recommendations are amplified, and the shopkeeper earns more, we earn more, everybody is happy. This is a better way to approach the market than discount your way to the customer's heart, which we don't believe in, to be honest, right? So this is one example. The other is, of course, a shopkeeper will want credit. We have a digital lending marketplace which captures transaction history and with the retailer's consent enables them to access that credit.
It's truly amazing to hear of the on-ground applications of technology and how WayCool utilizes it to optimize the day-to-day business activities of communities across the country. And apart from offering trustworthy digital solutions, Dell for Startups helps startups reach their goals and define new routes for their success. They help startups in India to accelerate their digital journey and solve some of the biggest challenges in the country, keeping Dell's core purpose in the forefront, creating technologies that drive human progress. Let's head back to Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies to find out more about Karthik Jayaraman's experiences promoting technology in less organized industries, the effect of the pandemic on consumer behavior, and what the bigger goal is. Karthik, I'm really fascinated about the amount of change you're able to drive with multiple set of stakeholders. There's the retailer, there's the farmer, there's the mandi, there is and of course there's technology that's a layer sitting on each of these stakeholders. And historically, at least a lot of our view, or at least urban view, has been that agriculture is tough, rural stakeholders are difficult, there's a lot of resistance, and now you've been at it for a bit, so clearly you might have faced some of that as you build this giant engine of growth and giant engine of change. Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, I think all the assumptions that you stated are valid and correct. Agriculture is tough. Stakeholders do fear change. They do fear what's happening in terms of the unknown, and we do face all these challenges on the ground. Ultimately, if we are able to, hear out what their problem statement is and show back to them how a solution benefits them, then you start getting engagement. We're not fussed, for example, on how digitally engaged these stakeholders are. We know that we'll have to work through intermediaries, but we've been pleasantly surprised on both ends once things caught on. For example, I service about 8,800 shops with just fresh produce. Almost none of them require my salesperson to come. They're able to use the app and place orders. Surprisingly, it's the dry grocery supermarkets and the kirana stores who have been slower in adopting technology, primarily because they're used to FMCG distributors coming and visiting them. So we get surprised pleasantly, when we see this traction building. And frankly, it's less about people using an app than about choosing a different service. And at that point, people understand if the service is valuable to them, if we're seen as a reliable supply partner, a predictable supply partner, then people are much more willing to, buy into your story. And that's something, of course, we have been buffeted by tumultuous events. And those tumultuous events have resulted in people questioning the robustness and resilience of their traditional partners. And when we were around, they realized that, hey, these guys are still around. Maybe we work with them, and that's how more retailers come onto our platform. Equally on the farmer side as well, right? We launched the Outgrow digital app. It's a bit of a super app where we offer a number of features, such as you can use AI to detect diseases. You can get micro weather information in your particular farm, etc. We launched it on March 4th. The historical belief has been that on the farm end, app adoption is relatively weak. This is a multilingual app. It's also got interfaces through voice and a bunch of other things. 200,000 downloads, 30,000 monthly active users, 3,500 DAU, 6 to 7 minutes of engagement every day. And the biggest engagement after, of course, everybody checks mandi price. The second biggest usage was using the camera of the phone to detect a disease. And then, talking to a call center or the chat room on that basis. That's adoption. You're not just using an app, you're sophisticated enough to use a very specific feature in that, which is a more advanced feature, and come back. So when the benefit is evident, people learn, people adapt, and people start engaging. We ask our farmers. We just had a growers meet last week in Chennai, where we asked them, you've been working with us for 6 years. Why? Right? And the farmer said, boss, you give me predictability. I know that you will take so much of volume. I know that you will take this crop. Now I'm able to plan my crop, and I know that I'll get my money. That predictability is missing when I'm dealing with multiple other stakeholders, including some of the wet markets that I supply my product in.
Very, very valid point. And I think there is a belief out there that you can be one, you can be profitable, or you could be good. You can't be both. But you clearly seem to believe that both is possible. I do too. I'd like to hear a little bit about, one, the vision for the company. And I know you are hoping for category revenue leadership and market leadership from where you are, and of course a listing somewhere in the site. So I'd love to hear about how you think of both these levers as we go along.
I've seen eminent folks also sort of dismiss the whole notion of being impactful as being quixotic. I don't buy that. I think there are enough examples in India, Perhaps it's true in relatively different civilizations, but in India, most established institutions have tried to build the nation first and incidentally build their institution. I don't think there's any other way. I have a lot of respect for the Tatas, for example. It's not a valuation out there, it's an institution that they have built, right? So I think there are, rationally speaking as well, people are ignoring cost heads, are not reading their cost heads right when they think that impact actually is costlier to deliver. Level 1 example. Every one of our warehouses today is being, it has a full STP, even though we're not required by law. We don't have any discharge, but still we set up full STPs in every one of our warehouses. Why? Everybody asks me, you don't pay for water over here. Why do you need to recycle your water and make sure your sewage is sorted and all of that? I pay for sewage. In India, every city, in every warehousing location, you have to put a septic tank, and you get a what's known euphemistically called a honeysucker has to come and take out the sewage, and that's 1500 rupees per truck. If you don't do that, God knows what. Firstly, even if you do that, God knows where they take the sewage and dump. So we didn't want to be part of that. Our STPs were engineered by us along with our fabrication partner. In fact, for our small warehouses, we have a sewage treatment plant that you can just put on the back of a Tata Ace and take it out. And this is engineered by us because nothing like that exists in the market. The payback period for that is 2 years and 4 months. Because I save so many of those honeysuckers that are coming in, and that savings more than makes up for the investment that I do in this machine. So that is an example of direct cost benefits that exist because of the the right steps that you take. There are other indirect benefits also. For example, if you build the right set of governance practices, the right set of values, your attrition will come down. Nobody is looking at their recruitment cost and their separation costs. Everybody is looking at their employee cost as a base. This goes somewhere below CM2 and nobody thinks about it. But you have to start examining those cost heads. Your logistics cost will come down if you do the right thing, because you will not be forced by the local community to take a complex detour because they don't like you in their neighborhood. If you're doing the right thing for that community, if you're using silent vehicles, 77 of our vehicles are electric. They're silent vehicles, so nobody is disturbed by them, and the community allows us to operate through the smaller streets. All those add up to your savings. These are the second order benefits. And the third order benefits are that if you're seen as doing the right thing for that community, the neighborhoods have the right things to say about you. They buy your products and your top line grows as well. We've seen all these effects. We're seeing the effects on the ground as we speak, and frankly, if it is an investor lens that sort of dismisses ESG, then they shouldn't be on your cap table. That's my view on this. At the same time, I have a quarrel with the whole notion of ESG reporting. My fear is that this will become more about greenwashing and consultants making money than actual work on the ground.
I'm just fascinated by how you're building this company, and more power to you. Karthik, it's been phenomenal chatting with you. I learned so much, and it is gratifying to see this company being built in India. And more power to your mission, more power to your team, and more power to the entire community and the governance structure you're building. Absolutely rooting for you and the company you're building. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to Karthik Jayaraman, co-founder and managing director of WayCool Foods, on Startup Dugout by Dell Technologies. If you're an entrepreneur that's forging your path with your dreams, Dell for Startups can help you in your digital journey and transformation. For more details, check out the links in the episode description.